An abandoned site in South London, an unlikely battleground for a fight over renewable energy.
Government thinking on waste and incineration is still dominated by a backward-looking, outdated, unambitious, burn and be done with it mentality.
EFW. Remember those three letters. Energy from waste. It's the government's answer to renewable energy, and it's all about incineration.
The landfill targets that we have to meet in 2010 are extremely challenging, and they're going to require local authorities, the public and government to play their role.
And that's the problem. Landfill is full. Britain produces 400 million tonnes of domestic waste a year, and Europe wants us to clean up our act. An alternative is energy from waste, burning rubbish to produce electricity. And it's PFI companies that are being sold the contracts to build the incinerators. There are 18 at the moment, and a further 22 in the planning process. And this is Belvedere, the brownfield site on which Britain's largest incinerator will be built. It's a massive undertaking, building a plant large enough to burn over 600,000 tonnes of household waste every year, producing enough energy to power over 66,000 homes. But it's controversial. 16 years in the planning process, bogged down in court action and dogged by a bitter public protest. Only last month did a High Court judge finally give it the green light. But that doesn't mean the local paper will stop its campaign against the incinerator.
It's been a bit of a knock to us that it was given the green light, because there was always that hope that the government would say, OK, we won't. Now they have. It doesn't mean we're going to lie back and take it, and I certainly don't think any people in Belvedere will.
Do you have any fears about the fact that you're going to start dealing with waste from more than just places from London in order to...
Yeah, I certainly think people in Belvedere are worried about that. It was brought up at the inquiry, you know, is it going to become that we ship in waste from other parts of Europe and start burning them in South East London? They've been wanting to build it for years, and thankfully the community have stopped it or delayed it for, as I said, over 12 years.
And crucial to that battle was this man. John Livingston founded the Bad Air campaign against the Belvedere incinerator in 1991.
John, you live quite close to the site for the Belvedere incinerator.
Indeed I do.
How would you say this kind of affects you personally?
Well, I could say actually more than that. We've had a number of firms which haven't come here because they know this is likely to happen. They don't want the dirty air. Paper firms, food manufacturing don't want to come here.
So other opportunities that would be available to the rest of the community are actually being sidelined now because
Absolutely
of this
they are. It's working diametrically against what the local community wants. We believe that this will push recycling out, and of course it's a very expensive process, and there are a number of places in other countries where they have incinerators that are costing the local people an absolute fortune because they don't do what they promise. It doesn't do what it says on the tin.
It's too big, it's in the wrong place, and it's also been set up without addressing, first of all, the issues of reuse, reduction, recycling.
But are these concerns realistic? 150 miles north in Nottingham is the Eastcroft incinerator. Like Belvedere, the local community here has been vocal in its opposition to incineration. The difference is, the burning waste is already on their doorstep. So, what's it like to live in the shadow of an incinerator? I asked one Nottingham parent about the trials of living near Eastcroft.
There can be dust on the windows and the cars. I mean, there's the myth, I don't know how much of it, is true, but there's an Eastcroft cough that people talk about in Sneinton. From knowledge that the incineration has breached, emission levels, it does worry me that we live so close to an incinerator.
And it's an experience shared by other residents in Nottingham.
Many of my friends and neighbours and people in this area tend to have lots of respiratory disorders. The children often have breathing problems, adenoid problems, asthma.
As a mother as well, I imagine you have concerns for the next generation, the children growing up in this area.
I'm really concerned that we live in a very polluted environment as it is in this city centre. You see that chimney, wherever you are in St Anton, you can't miss that chimney.
This one has breached emission targets year after year, and waste separated for recycling has been redirected to feed it, supporting fears that EFW will push recycling out. So John, we're standing outside the Nottingham incinerator and you can see the large chimney stack there. One of the main concerns about incineration are emissions.
There are over 1,000 different toxic poisons that come out of an incinerator. Things like mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead, chromium. There's also dioxins and PCBs. Dioxins are classified by the World Health Authority as the most cancerous substance known to science. And here we are, it's a man-made chemical belching out in the atmosphere. We don't need incineration. Over 80% of household waste can be recycled, and after all, 35% of what goes into that incinerator doesn't burn. It doesn't alleviate the need for landfill.
No, the government are actually calling incineration and energy from waste as a concept renewable energy. What would be your response to that?
The government are making it or trying to classify it as renewable because they want it to get what's called renewable obligation certificates to make it very financially viable so that private companies want to build them and make lots of money out of it.
So are we seeing a redefinition of the word renewable?
Absolutely.
According to DEFRA, energy from waste doesn't redefine the term renewable because it falls within an EU directive. But it's still a far cry from wind farms or solar power. They also defend themselves on the subject of emissions, claiming that EFW incinerators are more heavily restricted than gas and coal-fuelled power stations. In discussions over the 2006 Energy Review, the opposition accused the government of hiding the true extent of their plans for incineration.
And it is quite wrong to suggest that we didn't feature energy from waste as a potential renewable energy source in the Energy Review. We did, and our department made darn sure that we did.
Which is strange, as on government renewable energy websites, EFW is not listed. Perhaps it's because they're worried about it. We've obtained documents produced by PFI companies which clearly show that EFW's image problem is a big concern.
It's being glossed up to make it look as if it's something a lot more positive really than it is. This is, manipulation of language. It's not really renewable in the sense that you would look at solar energy, at wind energy. It's a way to make it sound better.
Being here at the entrance to the Belvedere site and having seen the Nottingham incinerator, what strikes me most is the contrast between the clean, green and glossy image put across by the government and the PR companies behind energy from waste, and the reality here on the ground. If you're having trouble kind of picturing the scale of this thing, then this is your average household bin bag. It weighs about 5 kilograms. They're going to burn 120 million of these here every year. To many, the government are taking the easy way out. Burn rubbish and call it green energy. But with landfill no longer an option, can we really cast incineration aside?
74% of our waste goes to landfill, and we've got to reduce that to 25% by the year 2020. Now, you can't do that all. Recycling plays a part of it, reduction of waste plays a part of it, but somewhere along the line, incineration has just got to be looked at.
Under government direction, the next few years will see a massive increase in incineration right across the country. So wasn't it deeply...
Politicians from across the party spectrum have criticised the government's approach to EFW. They've accused it of avoiding the negative associations of incineration by marketing it as a renewable energy alternative.
I think the government just sugar-coated incinerators as energy from waste. It's a polite euphemism for burning rubbish.
It will work against measures to encourage people to recycle.
Just this loose terminology doesn't cut the mustard in our book. We've got to be far more stringent, and just simply having an incinerator that happens to produce a bit of electricity, that ain't good enough.
To some of these contracts, which are 25, 30-year contracts, which basically say to people, you have to carry on producing this amount of waste so we can carry on running our incinerators.
What I'm concerned about is building a new generation of mass burn plant. You actually continually have to feed this thirsty beast with what requires rubbish to come in to keep it going.
And it really does lock us in to a waste market rather than waste reduction.
We need to be going in a totally different direction.
Today, this is Belvedere's battleground. But what happens here is part of a much wider conflict. It's a fight between government policy and local communities. And with 22 more incinerators waiting to be built, the fight isn't over.